The Subcommittee on Technology will come to order. Good morning. Welcome to today's hearing entitled An Overview of the Fiscal Year 2014 Budget Proposal at the National Institute of Standards and Technology. In front of you are packets containing the written testimony, biographies, and truth and testimony disclosures for today's witness panel. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes for an opening statement. Today we examined one portion of the President's budget proposal, the fiscal year 2014 budget request for NIST. Last week, I had the opportunity to visit NIST's campus in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and to see a sample of ongoing research activities. In my time there, I was able to visit the Net Zero Test Facility, the Center for Nanoscale Science and Technology, and the Center for Neutron Research. Dr. Gallagher, I want to thank you and let you know that your staff took very good care of me and my staff as well, and their enthusiasm for NIST's work was apparent throughout my tour. The fiscal year 2014 budget request for NIST totals $928 million, an increase of $177.5 million, or almost 24% from the fiscal year 2012 enacted level. Now this committee has a long bipartisan record of support for NIST and its contributions to research and development, but I think I need to repeat that figure. The President has requested a 24% increase for NIST in fiscal year 2014. That type of increase in a time of decreasing budgets will be very difficult to achieve and require significant changes in other areas. The requested increases would be devoted in large part to bolster advanced manufacturing initiatives by NIST, as well as in areas such as cybersecurity, disaster resilience, forensic science, and broadband communications. We're here today to learn more about the justification for this request, and I'm appreciative of the opportunity to learn more about how fiscal year 2014 funds would be prioritized by NIST. I thank our witness, Dr. Gallagher, for his time today. I now recognize the ranking member, the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Wilson, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Massey, for holding this morning's hearing to examine the fiscal year 2014 budget request for the National Institute of Standards and Technology. I'd also like to thank Dr. Gallagher for testifying today and for his leadership in NIST. It's good to see you again, Dr. Gallagher. NIST is an economic engine for this nation. For more than 100 years, the Institute's broad and deep technical expertise has advanced measurement science, standards, and technological innovation, strengthening our manufacturing sector and boosting innovation. In this time of painfully high unemployment, we need NIST. We need NIST's expertise more than ever. In this time in which developing nations are taking the lead not only in assembling products but also inventing products, we need strategic investment in research, development, and education. I'm pleased that the President's budget recognizes the importance of NIST and gives the agency a prominent role in the administration's efforts to revitalize American manufacturing. The administration's budget includes a number of initiatives that can strengthen and reinforce the competitive position of the United States. For instance, the Advanced Manufacturing Technology Consortia program that will create public-private partnerships to address technical barriers that are stopping the growth of advanced manufacturing here at home. It simply makes sense to leverage federal resources to bring companies together to solve common challenges. It boosts innovation and creates jobs. And that's what we should be concerned about. Jobs, jobs, jobs. The President's proposal also advances emerging fields such as biomanufacturing and nanomanufacturing. This research will provide a foundation for new and existing companies to flourish, producing high-quality, high-paying jobs that will remain with us over the long haul. Whether we like it or not, the truth is that most of our competitors are putting significant and targeted resources towards helping businesses, small and large, accelerate the commercialization of innovative technologies. They're doing it. I don't think we can afford to just stand by and watch these companies set up shop somewhere else. I don't think we can afford to just watch as these technologies and jobs take hold somewhere else. We need to support the administration's proposal for a national network for manufacturing innovation. This proposal is intended to help bridge the gap from research and development to commercialization through proof of concept activities and direct collaboration with industry. It is also intended to build up the skills of our workforce, preparing students for the manufacturing jobs of the future. I often worry about the class of 2013, high school and college. While some questions remain about these manufacturing institutes, I believe the concept has merit, and I'm looking forward to learning more about it today. I'm also interested in learning more about how the current budget request will advance NIST's effort to make our communities more resilient to natural disasters. I was born and raised in South Florida. I have seen my fair share of the devastation of severe weather. While we cannot stop hurricanes, tornadoes, or earthquakes from happening, we can and must do all that we can to make sure that our communities have the capacity and the tools they need to respond and recover from these events. Mr. Chairman, thank you again for holding this hearing, and I look forward to working with you and our colleagues to ensure that NIST has the resources it needs to fulfill its crucial role, promoting innovation, increasing competitiveness, and enhancing our security. And I yield back the balance of my time. 2 seconds.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. If there are members who wish to submit additional opening statements, your statements will be added to the record at this point. At this time, I'd like to introduce our witness. Our witness is Dr. Patrick Gallagher, the Undersecretary of Commerce for Standards and Technology and the Director of the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Dr. Gallagher is the 14th Director of NIST and the first to hold the position of Undersecretary of Commerce. He received his PhD in physics at the University of Pittsburgh. Thanks again to our witness for being here this morning. As our witness should know, spoken testimony is limited to 5 minutes each, after which the members of the committee will have 5 minutes each to ask questions. I now recognize Dr. Gallagher to present his testimony.
Chairman Massey, thank you very much for this opportunity to be here today, and Ranking Member Wilson, it is great to see both of you. And since this is my first official event in front of the subcommittee, let me congratulate both of you on your leadership positions and to say for the record that I'm looking forward to working with both of you. Today, I'd like to discuss and give you a quick overview of the President's fiscal year 2014 budget request for NIST. This budget reflects the important role that NIST plays as part of the President's plan to make America a magnet for jobs by investing in manufacturing. From transforming communities across the country into global centers of manufacturing through the establishment of the National Network for Manufacturing Innovation, to strengthening supply chains through MEP, to supporting innovative manufacturing technologies by investing in the R&D of the NIST laboratories, the proposed FY14 budget reflects NIST's role in the administration's efforts to strengthen manufacturing through critical investments in research and development. NIST's mission is to promote innovation and industrial competitiveness through advancing measurement science, standards, and technology, and it is well aligned with the priority goals articulated by the President. The NIST budget is comprised of 3 discretionary spending accounts as well as a mandatory proposal. Mr. Chairman, the President's discretionary funding request for $928.3 million reflects an increase of $177.5 million above FY12 enacted levels, and more than half of the proposed increased funding would be focused on advanced manufacturing research, both at NIST laboratories and through industry-led consortia. This budget was carefully crafted to address pressing needs for standards and measurement work, principally in emerging technology areas, and to provide the seed funding to encourage industry and academia to come together to address common technology problems that are too large for an individual institution to tackle by itself. The request for the laboratory programs of $693.7 million recognizes the important role NIST labs play in advancing innovation. The request is an increase of $126.7 million from the FY12 enacted level. Within the request, current administration priority areas targeted for budget increases include advanced manufacturing, cybersecurity, healthcare information technology, disaster resilience, forensics, advanced communications, and the NIST Centers of Excellence program. The request will help ensure that NIST laboratory research, facilities, and service programs continue to work at the cutting edge of science and will assist U.S. industry as well as the broader science and engineering communities with the measurements, data, and technologies they need to further innovate and make sure the U.S. remains industrially competitive. The request for the NIST Industrial Technology Services account is $174.5 million, representing an increase of 46.1 from the FY12 enacted level. The account includes $153.1 million for the Hollings Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program, or MEP, and $25 million for the Advanced Manufacturing Technology Consortia Program, or MTAC. MTAC will establish industry-led consortia to identify and prioritize research projects supporting long-term industrial research needs. The construction of research facilities request is $60 million. This is an increase of about $5 million. The increased funding will allow NIST to reduce the backlog of maintenance projects on its facilities and to improve the overall condition of them. This construction request also provides for the first year of a major project to renovate Wing 5 of the Building 1 laboratory complex at NIST Boulder facility. This building has been undergoing renovations in stages for some years now, and the continuation of this project is critical. As part of the administration's effort to revitalize manufacturing, the budget proposes a $1 billion mandatory account to establish a national network for manufacturing innovation, or NNMI, which aims to bring together companies, universities, and community colleges. Mr. Chairman, also included in this request are scientific programmatic initiatives that are tied to the overarching themes of this budget. In addition to the strong advanced manufacturing request, the cybersecurity request for protecting the nation's cyber infrastructure is a top priority of the administration. The initiative will enable NIST to strengthen its core cybersecurity R&D program that are the critical foundation upon which our ability to effectively engage with industry on cybersecurity is built. The NIST laboratory programs, along with its outreach efforts and standards development work, are dedicated to providing U.S. industry with the tools they need to innovate and compete and flourish in today's fierce global economy. And I look forward to working with you and the members of the committee. Thank you.
I thank the witness for his testimony. Thank you, Dr. Gallagher. Reminding members that the committee rules limit questioning to 5 minutes. The chair will at this point open the round of questions. And I'll recognize myself now for 5 minutes. So to your testimony, you mentioned that there's $1 billion in mandatory funds to be provided for the manufacturing initiatives. This is more than the annual budget for NIST. And so my question is, how will these programs occur if the $1 billion is not provided? And will this come from NIST, the DOE, the DOD? Where will this $1 billion come from?
So thank you for the question. So the NNMI proposal is designed to provide a one-time investment, not a continuous investment, to create basically a research infrastructure for the country. And the research infrastructure is designed actually to attract private sector, in other words, industry's R&D funding. We're trying to create a condition where a group of companies acting together can do something that they would not be willing to do on their own. The President's proposal would base the program at NIST. The reason for that is we have a very broad mission, and so the context for NIST managing the program would be to enhance the competitiveness of the country, to look at all of the different possible sectors as we ran the program. As I envision it, the funding would be available, for some finite period of time and would go out as a set of grants to support the formation of these institutes. If that would require legislation, and I think this committee would likely play a key role in developing that legislation. And your question is, if that legislation does not occur, where does the funding come from? And I think what would happen, given the fact that these institutes seem to be filling a key need, is we would have to leverage existing programs to make that happen. And in fact, the administration, both last year using DoD funding combined with some funding from other agencies, and the President announced his intent to do 3 more institutes this year, you're going to be leveraging existing programs at other agencies, and that's why the Defense Department and DOE have been identified. So,
okay, I understand that the DOE and the DOD may provide some funds if the $1 billion is not provided for by Congress, but my follow-up question would be, will NIST contribute any discretionary funding in fiscal year 2014 to those institutes?
Well, I think it would seem natural that at some level we would, but again, without a specific program, it would have to be in the context of our existing programs. And so NIST participation there in that context would probably have one of 2 flavors. It could be supporting the industrial R&D and measurement science, a core part of the NIST mission, and that would be very attractive because this is designed to be the industry's concentration of R&D. I can't imagine who else NIST would want to work with. The other area, of course, is in the small and mid-sized business. So the NIST MEP program is designed to provide that outreach to small and mid-sized manufacturers. And these institutes will play probably a magnet store role. When you have that concentration of capability and large companies want to be located near that, supply chains will want to be located near those big companies. And I think there's a very natural role for the NIST MEP program to play a supporting role. So we think there would be a good match for NIST to participate with these centers.
Okay, thank you. I have another minute here. I would briefly like to ask you about the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel that was created in 2009. This is of particular interest to me. I'm interested in energy and the efficient use of energy, because for all the talk about alternative energy, it's a lot cheaper to save energy than it is to try and create it with alternate means. So I understand that the leadership of the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel has recently been handed over from NIST to a nonprofit organization driven by the private sector. Can you please explain, in the brief time remaining, what NIST's role is in the continued development of the so-called smart grid, and is NIST directly funding any smart grid activities in fiscal year 2014?
So the quick answer, of course, is that NIST will remain very involved with the private sector-led effort. In the United States, almost all standards efforts are led by the private sector, and the mandate given to NIST is twofold. One is to support those efforts, and the other is to act as the go-between between those standards bodies and federal needs, so between the Energy Department, the energy regulators, and so forth. So we would need to remain involved. Our role will increasingly be technical, supplying the technical underpinnings of those standards, whether they're data communication standards or test and measurement standards. And we do anticipate continuing to provide support to that effort in 2014 and beyond.
Just quickly, if you could answer quickly, how much money do you think will be spent in 2014 on the smart grid from NIST?
Well, the amount that we've reallocated mostly from internal reprioritization is between $3 to $4 million a year in both technical and coordination support.
Okay. Thank you very much. My time has expired, and I now recognize Ms. Wilson for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Gallagher, as you know, over the past several years, our nation has experienced historic and devastating natural disasters, and numerous communities across America are still recovering and rebuilding. Hurricane Sandy was the nation's costliest storm since Katrina, killing hundreds of people in its path and causing billions of dollars in damage. I'm pleased to see that the budget request includes an additional $5 million to support NIST's work in the area of disaster resilience. Can you please describe this initiative and the activities NIST intends to undertake to improve the performance of buildings and infrastructure in the face of a disaster?
Great. Thank you. This is a critical area, as you know, because of the potential impact it has on so many. The NIST role actually ties to the answer I just gave the chairman, which is to support the standard setting. And in this case, for resiliency, what we're often talking about are standards that are written in a way that they become model codes. In the United States, building structures, houses, are regulated or managed, if you will, at the local level. Local building codes determine the standard of performance that we expect in our built infrastructure. And the way we ensure that built infrastructure is protective is twofold. One, we support technically a set of standards that can be adopted by local jurisdictions. They're called model codes. And two, we try to learn from experience. Unfortunately, in the case of disasters, we learn when something terrible has happened. And the NIST program is designed to work with local communities, understand why certain types of damage was experienced in the face of a natural disaster, whether it's earthquake, wind, fire, and to basically reflect that new understanding by improving the building code standards. And this has become critically important, and the NIST effort is designed to approach this from a multi-hazard perspective so that we can quickly identify lessons learned, come to an understanding about how do we improve our built infrastructure, and then work with the building and codes community to make those improvements.
Thank you. One other question. I have a little bit of time. I understand that the budget includes a $25 million increase to create manufacturing technology acceleration centers at MTACs as part of the Manufacturing Extension Partnership MEP Program. As you know, small businesses are the top job creators and the lifeblood of our economy. In your testimony, you describe how this new program would provide technology transition services to small manufacturers. Please elaborate on this new program. Specifically, how will these centers and their focus areas be selected? Also, how does this program build upon or relate to the existing supply chain of technology acceleration services being provided by the MEP centers?
Thank you. So the manufacturing technology acceleration centers are a concept that it's based on your observation, which is that small and mid-sized companies are where most of the employment growth and job growth occur, including manufacturing. It's also increasingly where the innovation is occurring. New technologies and processes are being developed by small and mid-sized manufacturers. And large companies don't support those manufacturers in the way they did in the past. The relationship between the big OEM manufacturers and the supply chain has certainly changed over time. And that's resulted in changes for MEP. So what we're trying to do is, through a grant program, issue a grant to an organization or center that would develop services that are technical in nature and would be addressing a particular supply chain. And whatever these services, these technology, so let me give you an example. Let's say we wanted to support advanced aerospace companies that want to be suppliers into the aerospace industry. Well, if you want to be a supplier to aerospace, you're going to have to learn how to work in their environment, what their expectations are, to meet their certification requirements, and to have the tools and quality assurance that you need to be an effective supplier in aerospace. What we'd like to do is work with experts in the aerospace industry to develop services that can be offered to small and mid-sized manufacturers that have this interest. So the MTAC centers would develop this content, and it could be deployed through the entire national network of existing MEP centers. That's the idea behind MTAC. It's a supply chain focus, a technology focus for the MEP network.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes Mr. Schweikert from Arizona for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doctor, what you get to do is fascinating, and some of the things you oversee, but I've always had first one global question. Think of everything you oversee, everything that's done at NIST. Can you walk me through some of the activities that could be found nowhere else? No university, no tech center, nowhere else that solely exist at NIST.
I sure can, and I thank you for the appreciation of the work. The most unique thing that you would find at NIST that you would find nowhere else are those activities that have been given to NIST and no one else. And they actually go to our core mission. And that is, we define the basis of measurement for the United States.
And Mr. Chairman, Doctor, okay, and that's almost the constitutional carve-out.
That's correct.
But many of those measurements are actually, MIT or those will help build the standards, but NIST will refine them and publish them.
Well, in the case of the actual measurement standards, the research even underneath that is probably unique to NIST. And so if you look at areas where NIST leads the world in its scientific capability, it tends to be in the areas where we have to be at the forefront, because the basis of a measurement, let's say the definition of time, has to be more accurate than any application of that measurement. And so we tend to be at the forefront in those particular areas.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Doctor, so okay, the measurement standards, what else?
The other areas would be ones where that have resulted from the standards coordination function. And they tend to be in these system areas. So cybersecurity, the nature of the cybersecurity research at NIST, because of the interface between both the government needs and industry, tend to be quite different than something you would find anywhere else.
And Doctor, you're telling me I could not find that anywhere else in the nation?
Well, it's always dangerous to say that, because you're not going to find you are going to find cybersecurity research all over the world, in fact, but the composition of the research program at NIST would look different. So it depends what you mean by overlap.
And one of the natures of my question is so often we sort of have, I guess the pop culture term is mission creep of NIST, its core function of being the czar of time and measurements, and it's almost a constitutional requirement. And yet we often ask you to do so many other things and reach into other activities. And the more I'm here in Congress, starting to wonder, should we actually be pushing you the other direction and focus on your core competence and stay out of some of the other affiliated activities?
Well, I don't know if you'd have to push us much, because we try to stay close to our core competency as well. I've always believed that as an agency, mission focus is one of the most important things you maintain.
But even some of the discussion we were just having with the supply chain, I can take you to a dozen universities around the country that literally have a mission statement that sounded exactly like you just described.
But they don't have a mission to provide. In fact, a lot of their capability, in fact, is working with NIST. So this.
But they may gain some of the talent, but their mission statement, they're almost duplicative. Being from Arizona, where you think about our level of aerospace and technology, and some of at our engineering school at ASU and others, where they're also helping with some of the supply chain technology and being able to become a provider. Preferred providers and mechanics. It was amusing only because of the irony of, I think I was hearing this on Tuesday from some folks from the engineering school saying almost the exact same language you just spoke.
But in the case of the MTAC program, it's not so much technical activity at the agency. It's a grant program that would, in fact, maybe it would fund work in Arizona to provide. And what we're providing is just the connection with all the hundreds of thousands of manufacturers through.
And Mr. Chairman, Doctor, you don't believe those relationships, those contacts happen in dozens of other functions, whether it be associations, that thing called the Internet?
Well, I certainly believe that there's many. I do believe there are many ways of providing that, and one of them is the NIST program to provide that outreach by partnering with the states. Okay. You're right. That is not unique.
And I know it's always uncomfortable, having actually run a government agency at one time, where we're getting pulled because we are available with talent and getting pulled away from our core mission. And particularly in a world with budget restraint and lots of talent and the ability to share it and communicate it, it's something I'm going to continue to try to understand better in NIST. And you may see me being a very aggressive advocate of support and making sure you have the resources on your core, and being very concerned about moving away from that. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Now we are in the second round of questioning, and so to start again, I'll yield myself 5 minutes. Dr. Gallagher, one of the more interesting things that I witnessed during my trip to NIST were the user facilities or the user centers where outside researchers or even commercial institutions could come and use your facilities, and some of them are very unique, such as the nuclear reactor that provides a stream of neutrons to bombard things to give us visibility into the invisible, and also the micro-machining tools that use ion beams. These tools are very expensive and hard for other people to acquire, and so I sort of like the library-type model that you have there where outside parties can come and use those. Of course, one measurement of whether those tools are the right tools to provide is whether the usage level of those. And I was encouraged to hear that you're somewhat oversubscribed for those tools. So my question is, in trying to offset the cost for those, there are fees charged to commercial entities. And how close do those fees come to providing for the cost of those tools? And how could you get closer to a break even? I'm almost certain it doesn't break even, but how could you come closer to break even? Should you maybe raise the price on those if they are oversubscribed? Thank you.
So in the case of national user facilities in the United States, there's two types of cost recovery that can be done. One is supporting federally funded research, and both of the facilities you identified predominantly are used by researchers that are funded by other federal agencies doing the work. And the longstanding U.S. position there has been, rather than charge one agency to pay for the services at another through a user fee, to basically, it's the steward partner model. The stewarding agency that runs the facility operates the cost and provides the beam time on purely a merit basis on the quality of the proposal without charging a fee. And it's been found over a long period of time that that results in the decisions being based on the best science for this limited capability rather than the capacity to pay. In the case of company use, when a company is going to use a unique capability like this for their own purposes and capture the data and not publish it, in other words, there's no public benefit, we charge full cost recovery, including the amortization of the facility. And I think the break even or not just depends on, the fraction of work that's being done proprietary, which tends not to be exceedingly high in these cases, and part of that's by design. These cutting-edge tools tend to be used most often in the pre-competitive realm. So
maybe you could price them at their value instead of at their cost, and use some of the, if there's a differential, use some of the extra money to offset the research costs.
Well, the cost recovery rules are in OMB Circular A130. I'm going to get that wrong, but in one of the OMB circulars, and there are in fact two ways to recover cost. One is by cost recovery, full cost, and the other is by market value. The problem you run into with these unique facilities is how do you determine the market value?
Right. Well, if it's oversubscribed, then maybe it's underpriced. But I hear your point that some of those subscriptions are from other research labs, not from commercial entities.
Well, again, from a pure science perspective, we like oversubscription because it means that the selection committees are discriminating and really selecting the best of the best. Most grant programs like to see that. So happy to talk to you more about that issue. It's quite
Thank you very much. That's very sufficient. So in the first round of questions, we talked about the Manufacturing Technology Acceleration Centers and how that's going to work through the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program. So my question would be, there's $25 million in the budget to do this new manufacturing program. If that $25 million is not provided, do you anticipate using funds from the MEP program to work with the MTAC program?
So let me try to clarify. The MTAC program is part of MEP. It's a name we gave to basically grants that are developing content for the MEP rather than the grants that go to the centers that are delivering services. So it's designed to augment what MEP does by giving it technology services that have been developed by that sector. So it's really part of the same program.
I hate to be a pessimist, but if the funding for the MEP program is the same this year as it was last year, will you be able to fund the expansion of its role into the MTAC program using existing MEP funds at all?
Not very much. So most of the funding for the MEP goes to the existing centers, so the capacity to develop new content would be quite limited. Obviously, we try to do whatever we could working with private sector developers to come up with content, but it would be
Thank you.
Limited.
Thank you very much. And now I yield 5 minutes to the Ranking Member, Ms. Wilson. Ms. Wilson yields her time to Mr. Peters from California.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I had a question about the health IT information technology. There's a $3 million initiative that you refer to, and as I understand, this would expand on the existing efforts in health IT at NIST and would advance work to develop standards and testing for the meaningful use of electronic health records. And the meaningful use is a term from the ACA with some meaning. You ultimately want to require interoperability between different systems, and I wanted to sort of see if you could maybe elaborate on the current efforts in interoperability and how the new initiative would help the healthcare professionals and hospitals as they are preparing to answer a lot of the open questions about how to implement the ACA.
That's a great question, and the NIST role has been to support the functioning of health information technology. And in the early phases, a lot of what our work was doing was promoting the testing tools and validation tools that demonstrated meaningful use. And the idea was to drive the performance of these systems by making sure that they were put into practice by doctors and physicians. So showing that it could, pull up prescription information and be disseminated back to the pharmacy and so forth. Increasingly now, you're going from sort of standalone information technology to a very broad and diffuse system. So as the health IT program matures, interoperability across platforms is going to become a major driver, and that's the next phase of the health IT program. The request is to support the NIST effort to develop compliance tools and validation tools to test the code and function that industry is developing. It's actually not an augmentation of program. The NIST program to date has not received any base funding. It was actually fully supported by one-time Recovery Act funding that in fact expires at the end of this year and a limited amount of reprogramming we were able to do from within the agency.
So, and just to follow up and to clarify, one of the things that's exciting and happening a lot in San Diego is the development of wireless health, digital health. The opportunity, say, for instance, to monitor a person's cardiac performance or their glucose levels from a remote location that might save money on things like office visits or emergency ambulance rides or emergency room stays. One of the things we're going to have to think about is how to make those systems mesh with these record systems. And I want to know is that part of your effort, or is that something you anticipate getting involved in?
That's very much part of the effort, both from the functionality and from the security and privacy aspects that are going to come with that kind of technology.
Right. Well, wish you the best. It's a lot of opportunity. I believe you can only cut doctors' pay so much and raise taxes so much. A lot of what innovation can provide is new and cheaper ways to accomplish the goals that really will reduce the healthcare costs, and that will depend a lot, as you know, on the ability of NIST to set standards that everyone can work off as they innovate. So I appreciate your being here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now honored to recognize for 5 minutes Chairman of the full committee, Chairman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Gallagher, first of all, thank you for your commitment to public service, which is extended over many years. That's rare, but admirable. I have a couple of questions. The first is in fiscal year 2013 and in fiscal year 2014, how much money do you anticipate will be spent by NIST in implementing the administration's February executive order on cybersecurity?
So that's we haven't scraped up a separate budget account to track that closely.
Actually,
so
that was my next question. What accounts is it going to come from?
It's going to come. It's largely leveraging our work in our cybersecurity division.
Okay. If you don't know 2014, what about 2014?
Roughly for this year,
Yeah.
which is sort of the primary scope of the executive order, it's about $3 million that we anticipate. That sounds amazingly small given the tasking that was in the executive order, but the magic sauce is that we really want industry to develop this framework, and so most of those costs are supporting the coordination and sort of pulling together all of the material coming in from all of these sectors and managing the discussions that will help pull the framework together.
So you're going to try to leverage that $3 million and increase it exponentially through the private sector. Okay. Gosh, you're right. That seems an awfully small amount. What about 2014? About the same, more? What would you expect?
So I think looking in the out years, I envision the framework that is being developed. It cannot be a one-time develop and stop. The technology we're talking about is too dynamic. What I really hope happens is something akin to smart grid, where as we pull this together the first time, the private sector begins to continuously manage and fine-tune this framework. That will actually drive the NIST technical programs, because that will result in questions about, how do we address identity management or roots of trust or better cryptography or other forms of technical solutions that industry will need. And that's actually reflected in our 14 requests. That $8 million of R&D base is designed to support what is becoming a very stretched out technical capability at NIST.
Okay, thank you. Next question, different subject. In regard to these new manufacturing centers, what metrics would you recommend that we use to evaluate these programs?
Well, the ultimate goal is a long-term one. It should increase the rate of innovation by the participating companies. This is about creating the modern equivalent of Bell Labs. You're trying to get a group of companies collaborating and sharing and leveraging each other to do what used to be done by large vertically integrated monopolies. And you should see the same kind of innovation. In the short term, what I hope you see is this incentivizes an increase in private sector investment in R&D. It pulls their investments upstream.
But in both in regard to the current programs and, as you said, the proposed augmented programs, but how do you evaluate them? Are there any specific metrics, any specific data we ought to be looking for to gauge their success?
Well, I mean, measuring technology success is always a tricky thing. We have economists who try to study that because the ideas diffuse into different products. You can certainly look at rates of IP generation and patent filings. You can look at new company startups that are going to happen as a result of this. In some cases, one of the problems is that some of the most exciting things a company pulls in and they don't tell us about. In fact, sometimes we know the most exciting work is when they stop telling us about it. And in some cases, you don't see the payoff until quite a bit later as you see new products and services going in. So I think from a measurement perspective, how do we measure success? It's going to have to be a layered set of things. Some early indicators that indicate that this is starting to be pulled together, and then we're going to have to continue to monitor this for a long time to see some of the economic payoffs in markets and new products and services and so forth.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Gallagher. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I now yield 5 minutes to Ranking Member Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Gallagher, in your testimony, you mentioned the need to support the manufacture of emerging technologies, including biomanufacturing. Specifically, you discuss efforts that could help create new manufacturing paradigms for using cells as factories for fuel, pharmaceuticals, and specialty chemicals. These efforts align with the White House's report, The National Bioeconomy Blueprint, a strategic plan to help the nation realize the potential of the economic activity fueled by research and innovation in the bioeconomy. Would you please describe your efforts in biomanufacturing and how these activities will help the nation attain the benefits of the bioeconomy?
Thank you. I'd be happy to. Of course, you know, the explosion of understanding in bioscience is probably the most dramatic scientific development in my career. It's been a game changer. The NIST role is very simple. It's our core mission. It's to advance the measurement science in biotechnology, and particularly the measurement science that controls the adoption of this technology. And what I think it means and what the focus of our request is really in two areas. One is the production using biology to produce things is becoming mainstream. It's becoming a manufacturing process. And we do not have the process measurement tools to control and reproducibly, repeatably, reliably produce high-quality materials. If we can't do that, these things will never achieve the scale and the cost reduction in market to make it a viable production technology. And the second area where measurements are playing a major role is in supporting the demonstration of safety and efficacy. Well, you see this no more clearly in the pharmaceutical area, where the pace of technological development, our ability to, let's say, make a new vaccine, is much, much faster now than our capacity to regulate it and demonstrate its safety and efficacy. And you see this increasing mismatch. And one of the things we talk about very closely with FDA and others is, can we provide a rich measurement so we can understand the biomolecule that we've produced in a way that would really facilitate a rapid and effective protection of the public as well. So both in the regulation and the production, we think that the maturity of measurement science is one of the limiting steps, and that would be the area that NIST would focus in.
That's fantastic. Another question. As part of the budget request, you're proposing $20 million for the creation of 4 NIST Centers of Excellence. The budget request describes these centers as interdisciplinary environment where NIST academic and industry researchers will collaborate on basic and applied research focused on innovations in measurement science and new technology development. Certainly the success of NIST current research collaborations with the University of Colorado and the University of Maryland is in some part due to the presence of NIST and its scientists in these geographic locations. How is NIST planning to ensure the active and full participation of its scientists in these proposed centers of excellence, and what research areas do you envision these centers focusing on, and do you plan to put one in Miami?
We hope Miami submits a great proposal. So we would like to do this competitively, and the Centers of Excellence program is very simple. It's designed to facilitate a partnership to expand the effectiveness of NIST mission. It's kind of a selfish initiative. This is about making NIST do its core mission better. The example you gave about JILA at the University of Colorado is a great example. For more than 50 years, we've been able to sustain, with NIST staff working right alongside top academic researchers, a state-of-the-art effort in research that is essential to our core mission, producing better clocks and understanding time and some of the quantum measurement. It's allowed us to be at the forefront. And I don't think that example is unique. I think that there are many cases where, rather than NIST simply going into its labs and doing it by itself, by working with others in partnership, we actually achieve our mission better. There's a lot of competition for what the best area can be, and so we're going to both compete this internally to identify the areas that offer the most, and that's how we involve our scientists, offer the most engagement and benefit. It could be biosciences, which is a big growth area for NIST. It could be an environment where we're working much closer with industry. And then once we've identified the technical area where we think we get the most mission impact, we're going to do an open competition where universities and other stakeholders can propose and give us their ideas for how partnership would be most effective. And so we certainly hope Miami is going to be a participant or any other area be a participant in that competitive process.
Thank you. That's exciting.
Thank you very much. Now yield 5 minutes to Mr. Hultgren from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for being here. A couple questions. First, in the fiscal year 2014 NIST budget request, more than half of the proposed increase in funding would be focused on advanced manufacturing efforts. While recognizing manufacturing is very important to our nation and economy, a lot of this new funding is focused in areas of technology and knowledge transfer. I'm concerned that the core long-term research that supports manufacturing is going to be left behind as the Institute advances initiatives that provide more short-term Band-Aids. When the infusion of cash has gone out the door, are you confident we will have not lost focus on longer-term needs in manufacturing?
So I may not understand the concern because the majority of the NIST funding is in fact in long-term areas. It's core research in measurement and science that is related to the highest growth, in other words, the newest technology areas in advanced manufacturing. So it's enhancing our capacity to support the metrology or measurement science needed for production of nanomaterials or biomaterials, or for some of the standard support we're going to have to do for some of the advanced system integration in smart manufacturing and smart. So you know, it looks like a big refocus for NIST into manufacturing, but remember, NIST since 1901 has sort of been industry's national lab. The truth of the matter is almost all of NIST has been related to manufacturing in one way or another for its entire history. And so this program is really focused on developing the core capacity in our laboratory program. We're very much part of our core mission so that we can support what's the fastest moving areas of industry.
Yeah, I'm a broken record here, fighting for research and fighting for what only we can do and what other private sector can't do, the free market can't do, and where I feel like when we've got extra resources, I think it's great to get more into the application and to the applying. My focus is to make sure that we're not taking money away that should go to research when that money is so limited. Let me go on to another question. How does NIST balance short-term, low-risk, low-reward research projects versus long-term, high-risk, high-reward research projects when making funding decisions? And just kind of a follow-up on that, or a couple follow-ups, how does NIST determine the proportion of basic research versus applied research projects when allocating funding? And wonder, is there a balance that, as director, you look to maintain across your activities between the more fundamental versus the more applied type of work that NIST funds?
So the lens I always use for those decisions is our mission effectiveness, and that tends to mean that a large proportion of our work is actually in very basic areas, and that actually touches on the point you raised, which is uniqueness. That's the role that we could play that others will not play. Industry is taking a very short cycle research, so it would not make sense for NIST to be heavily involved in very applied research or development. The mix, I think, comes from relevance. It wouldn't do any good for NIST to have this beautiful academic research that was irrelevant to application in industry. And so the balance tends to come exclusively from making sure we have the capacity to do that cutting-edge research to stay ahead of the measurement science, or this very core NIST mission, but also have an understanding of how that measurement science is applied in real-world technology so that the translation is effective.
My encouragement in that is just to, I know that's an always changing balance, but especially when resources are tight, to have it focused on that basic research and research, again, that no one else can do. And then the applied research is always an option when there's additional resources, but we've got to make sure that we've got that core mission in place. Let me move on still. My time is limited, but wondering what NIST is doing to measure and evaluate the economic impact of its programs.
So we have a program that does, in fact, has developed sort of one of the leading methodologies for looking at economic impact of its work. As you know, as I was pointing out earlier, that's a complicated business, but we will routinely take several of our programs a year and then do a retrospective economic analysis to ascertain the economic payoff, the economic benefit, And of course, it's with such a diverse agency, these tend to be rather diverse studies in terms of how we do that. The other way we do that is by industry validation. The Visiting Committee on Advanced Technology, our leading advisory committee, is made up predominantly of chief technology officers at that level from companies, and we routinely ask them to make sure that our work is relevant to them. Now, it's not an economic study, but it is a relevancy assessment, if you will.
Okay. I just have a few seconds left, but if I can, I got here a little bit late and just would love to get your thoughts. Brain science is something very interesting to me, very concerning to me of some of the diseases. How do we improve the understanding and treatment of autism, Alzheimer's, and other neurological disorders? And what role do you see NIST playing in standards and technology surrounding various drug compounds or other therapeutics that could help us improve people's lives in the long run?
Well, I appreciate the question. And this is going to sound like a broken record too. I think our role is actually in the measurement science piece of this. In fact, we're already getting a lot of demand from both universities, companies, and other federal agencies to support some of the very difficult, very challenging measurements associated with neurological disease, understanding brain function, measuring misfolded proteins, understanding. These are areas that where our ability to measure, particularly measure in living beings and not under laboratory conditions, is very immature. And so that's one of the areas, that's why biosciences has come up as an area where we've really got to come up to speed in supporting those advances in measurement science.
I agree. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your indulgence. Yield back.
Thank you very much for your questions. We're going to do at least a third round of questions. And I'll begin by yielding myself another 5 minutes. My first question would be, and I want to ask a series of short questions, and I don't require anything but short answers. When we talk about cybersecurity funding at NIST, what portion of that should be public domain and what portion of that should be classified? And is NIST really the right place to be doing cybersecurity research, or should we be doing it in a more closed environment?
So NIST is the place where you would want to put the non-classified work. You've got to have capability to develop the capability to protect in commercial technology. So if all the research is classified, then the translation to practice and putting it into industry, what's global markets, is actually hampered. And so the NIST role is almost all unclassified.
Okay, that's a great lead into my next question, which is, it seems like the rates of technology transfer are higher, and I'm asking this question because this might be one of the metrics of success at an institution such as NIST, but it seems like the rates of technology transfer are higher at universities, particularly research universities like MIT or Caltech, than they are at NIST. And what could you do to improve the rates of technology transfer at NIST?
So we're actually very actively trying to increase rates of technology transfer at NIST by targeting our SBIR program, making it more focused, by promoting tech transfer by our research staff and making sure that this is a valued activity. But I want to emphasize the role of NIST is to drive things into practice, but it will not look the same way that measuring entrepreneurial startups would look for a major university. We don't, our role is not to have federal employees go off and start companies and come back and do some of those activities. So what we're trying to do is work with all of the federal agencies to broaden and develop a more nuanced understanding of what tech transfer means. And so NIST has been working with OMB and other federal agencies to, and we'd like to actually work with you on that as well.
So you keep leading me to my next question. You must be reading my mind, or you have a camera up here. My next question concerns SBIRs. And I have some experience in my private background of working with SBIRs. And my question to you would be, as Congress here, we sort of dictate how much extramural and intramural spending that you can do. And as far as the SBIR program goes, I would like your personal opinion on, would you rather see more funding toward SBIRs and less on your, for instance, intramural programs, or would you rather see it the other way around? Or have we, as Congressman, achieved the perfect balance in giving you that money and dictating how much is intramural and extramural?
It's one of those eye of the beholder questions. It depends. So clearly we like NIST is predominantly intramural, and our SBIR program is consequently quite small. I think the right way to get that is, I think we're fairly close to the right answer. I haven't had a major desire to see it move one way or the other. I am of the belief, though, that we can do much more to make sure that the SBIR funds that are allocated are much more effective. And that's been the big improvement we've been focused on, is you need to step back and strategically look at that investment. It is quite unique. It's one of the only investments we make into innovative small startup companies, and I'd like to see it punch its weight more.
And my final question in this series is, NIST has impressive rates of employee and staff retention. It seems like when people go to NIST, they like it and they don't leave, and that allows you to do long-term projects that would be harder to do with a lot of turnover. On the other hand, the university model is that you kick them out of the nest, and you don't want too much retention, because then you kind of reach this stasis. So how do you avoid getting into a rut at NIST when you have such great employee and staff retention?
Yeah, you're exactly right. For an agency that has to have long-term research roots, the stability is in fact very desirable. It's actually quite competitive, and so any other science aid, you also want churn. You want this lifeblood of new young people coming right out of school with fresh ideas. And so it's been very important for us to have a very aggressive postdoc program, to have guest researcher programs, and to have this fluidity of new ideas and engagement, while having a core cadre of senior scientists that, in fact, are there. That's a perpetual management challenge that we manage all the time, but it's very important.
Thank you, Dr. Gallagher. And I yield 5 minutes to Ranking Member Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, Chair Massey. Dr. Gallagher, one of my colleagues expressed concern about mission creep at NIST. However, as I recall, the mission of NIST, it is to promote U.S. innovation and industrial competitiveness by advancing measurement science standards and technology in ways that enhance economic security and improve our quality of life. I believe that this is a broad mission, and I don't believe the budget request is pushing NIST outside of its core competencies. Would you agree to that? And do you believe the budget request reflects the mission of NIST?
Yeah, I would, in the strongest possible terms, agree. I think NIST has been true to its mission. Its mission is broad. It includes not only core basic research and measurement science, but support to small and mid-sized manufacturers. It includes the primary responsibility for tech transfer regulation in the United States. I think, and we hold true to that. The challenge we always face is, given that broad mission with limited resources, how do you set effective priorities? But I believe wholeheartedly that one of the secrets of success to NIST, now well over 110 years old, is this: it's been true to its mission from the beginning.
Okay, just another question. The release of the National Research Council's Forensic Science Report in 2009, which concluded that forensic science system in this country has serious problems, served as a wake-up call and has prompted discussions throughout the federal government and the stakeholder community about how best to improve forensic science research and practice. I'm pleased that the budget request highlights your efforts in forensic science. Can you tell us more about what activities NIST intends to undertake related to forensic science in fiscal year 2014, and how NIST is partnering with the Department of Justice to improve forensic science?
Thank you. NIST, it's interesting, NIST has actually been involved with forensic science for most of its history. NIST scientists actually predated the establishment of the FBI crime lab and helped establish it, worked on the Lindenberg case. So we've actually had a long record here, and the role, in fact, is our core mission. It's to provide the measurement science underpinnings for a forensic measurement. The best example today is DNA, which was held up by the Academy as one of the very effective types of forensic measurement. The NIST staff have worked with the community to define the core measurement methodology and sort of protocols and standards that are used by D&E crime labs and make that technique so reliable. So realizing that was a model, the announcement we just had is a working arrangement between NIST and the Department of Justice to strengthen that. And basically it will be formalized through a joint commission that would be co-chaired by the Justice Department and NIST. It will bring together a broad community of practice from scientists and laboratory officials to criminal prosecutors, defense attorneys, and judges. And the goal is twofold. At NIST, our responsibility is to look at areas where the measurement science underpinnings of a forensic technique are not well established. And those tend to be what you might consider a low-tech measurement. How do you compare, what's the reliability of comparing a tire imprint left at a crime scene with a tire, and how unique is that measurement, and how degraded before you can't say anything about it? It could be in blood serum, it could be in chemical measurements and so forth. So our job will be to do the measurement science and then work with the community of practice to turn that into the types of protocols, standards for laboratories, maybe certification requirements for the expertise of the personnel that do those measurements. And those can be adopted at the state and local level, and then the Justice Department will decide whether they will be applicable for federal crime labs under their jurisdiction.
I just need to make a comment. Every second, this is so exciting. And I know that the people who work with you and collaborate with you and the people at NIST and have the most exciting lives in all of this research. This is just amazing. And thank you so much for all that you do for this nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. I'd like to thank Dr. Gallagher for his valuable testimony today and for having so much stamina, undergoing 3 rounds of questioning and being the only witness here before us. I thought your answers were excellent. And I also want to thank you and your staff for hosting our visit to NIST a couple weeks ago. I'd like to thank the members for their questions and remind them that the record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional comments and written questions from members. Dr. Gallagher is excused, and this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.